Good evening all, I'm Aditi Lama and this is the Wednesday night Vision of Asia. Welcome to our South Asian news segment coming to you from our studio located in Astoria, New York City. Hope you all are doing well and are taking all necessary measures of social distancing while the nation is reopening. Tonight we continue to present more opinions on the case of George Floyd's death and the nationwide spread of anti-racist protests, along with much on COVID-19 relief efforts and the Indian American nonprofits. Today, more than 7.2 million cases of the novel coronavirus have been confirmed worldwide, with at least 412,000 deaths. The global economic ramifications of COVID-19 will take at least 2 years to recover, with some of the highest rates of unemployment seen in the last few months. Here in the United States, almost half the U.S. states are seeing a higher rate of new COVID-19 cases as the nation reopens all across, and protests for justice for Floyd continue to mobilize communities advocating for racial justice and to end systemic oppression. We have tonight much on the issue of racism and anti-blackness in the South Asian community, along with much on the efforts done by South Asian nonprofits that are giving back to the communities in need. If you are a South Asian on the front line or are associated with an organization participating in COVID-19 relief, do connect with us on events at itvgold.com. We look forward to bringing forth more advocates, representatives, and medical professionals on ITV Gold. You can also connect with us on our Facebook. With that, it's now time to start tonight's episode. Let's take a look at the headlines. Dr. Kanchan Koya on the Cookbook, Spice Baby and Asian Spices in New York. Suman Raghunathan on systemic racism, police brutality and anti-blackness, New York City. Punjabi Chamber of Commerce and Sewa International hosts Drive-Thru food distribution in Edison, New Jersey. Time for a short break. Stay with us on Vision of Asia. Voice of the Community will be back shortly. Welcome back, I'm Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia. Beginning the episode, we are following the very sad case of George Floyd's death, who was killed untimely by a Minneapolis police officer, with nationwide protests now continuing to demand racial justice and an end to systemic oppression in the country. George Floyd was laid to rest yesterday in Houston, Texas, as thousands of mourners joined in to pay their respects. On the Capitol Hill, 35 members of the House of Representatives sent a letter to several federal agencies demanding an end to alleged surveillances of peaceful protests as people across the country continue to demonstrate against police brutality. Bringing much perspective on this and the need to end racial injustice, anti-blackness and systemic oppression, earlier today we spoke with well-known strategist and an expert on immigrant rights and racial justice, Suman Raghunathan. Speaking very passionately, Suman reflected upon key understandings from these protests as well as the death of George Floyd.
In Minneapolis, right, the local police department has decided, as you said, to ban the use of chokeholds. The Minneapolis City Council has also voted overwhelmingly to essentially reimagine and defund the police department as it is currently being envisioned, because I think they have realized that that system is not serving all members of the community. In New York State just passed a law to repeal a very troubling law that banned and sealed the use and sharing of records that outlined which police officers have been accused and convicted of police brutality and police misconduct. And so there is no way for community-based organizations or even individuals to know which police officers in their communities were already seen as dangerous and suspect. Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd, had almost a 20-year record of police brutality against many individuals. It seems to me that he was not someone that was well-equipped to be able to keep his community safe from others, but perhaps from himself. And so I think in a lot of different places, it means reimagining and rethinking what it means for us to develop a police and law enforcement system and structure that is truly able to keep all of us safe.
Is defunding the real answer? Suman, I'm trying to understand how defunding would actually help the system, because, you know, the concerns are it could be dangerous for the society as well.
Mm-hmm. again, I think that defunding doesn't, in some places, it could mean decreasing the amount of funding for police and giving more funding to local civilian organizations that are able to help individuals and deal with substance abuse, perhaps, or deal with domestic violence. In some communities, it could mean, you know, giving more funding to organizations that are focused on police transparency. In New York City, we have an independent entity called the Citizens Complaint Review Board that for decades has been tasked with reviewing complaints against police in the vein of violence, brutality, and misconduct. I think that it looks different in different places, and I don't think that it will work for us to advance a one-size-fits-all definition of defunding the police. And I think in a lot of places, the proportion of the police and law enforcement budget comparative to so many other services that are key to help keep a community whole and safe has been not in balance. And so I think this is a time for us to reimagine both the set of priorities as well as the level of funding that is commensurate with helping to make sure that law enforcement are able to build close, real ties with the communities in which they are working and work with the community to really help keep people safe. You know, law enforcement leaders for the longest time, including but not limited to the former chief of police of Philadelphia that has seen any number of protests, have all spoken out and said the level of violence and the murder of George Floyd, as well as those of countless others, is not the way that police should be operating in their communities. And there needs to be a reevaluation and a gut check to say this is not what we should be seeing when it comes to the hands of police. And this has been occurring for so many decades.
Yeah, for sure. And my question to you in that would be, you know, when you're looking at everything that's happening right now, Suman, and we're talking about the need for change, we're talking about a lot of cases that have just literally come out in the front, all saying something about police brutality. What have you felt about the president's response to this case, as well as how the White House administration is handling this? Do you think they are lacking perhaps, or do you think they're doing their job right?
I continue to be disappointed at the response of the president as well as the White House with respect to the uprisings and the ways that the president, as well as his supporters in the White House, have continued to fan the flames of violence. When you have a sitting president who references the words of a brutal police chief from the 1970s who vowed, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, you have an individual who is not working to calm down a powder keg of a situation across the country. You have someone who is choosing explicitly to pit residents against each other, which is not a course of action or words that will do anything to help defuse the high emotions and sentiments that are coming across the country. What is clear to me is that this administration, both via its actions, its statements, as well as its policies, does not care at all about ending police brutality, about ending systemic racism, or really about the lives that have been lost. When you have the current president indicating that a peaceful protester who was 75 years old in Buffalo, New York, pushed himself to in turn sustain a critical injury at the hands of police, I see yet another incident of blaming the victim of a tragic, violent incident. And I know that our nation deserves better, and that our whole set of residents across the country and really the world also deserves better.
You know, Simon, in the South Asian community, there is a sense of anti-Blackness, and apparently there is a lack of understanding of their own history of being a model minority. I think this is a good part in the interview for us to have a little discussion on that and your comments on that. How prevalent is this issue, and how important it is for us to right now discuss that there is anti-Blackness issue in the community, in which we have to educate and raise awareness so that, you know, we can understand that this issue just doesn't impact Black lives, it impacts all lives, all brown and Black communities.
I think this is a moment of deep reflection and a real opportunity for South Asians to be able to really understand, even from a historical perspective, the ways that South Asians have been pitted against very explicitly Black individuals and communities. I think it's important also for us to understand that we in our own community often hold very deep-seated feelings of anti-Blackness and are often very quick to distance ourselves from Black individuals and from Black communities, and that continues to play into the rules of an explicitly white supremacist agenda. White supremacists want South Asians to believe that we are slightly better than Black folks, but they will never consider us their equals. And the level of violence that has been aimed against South Asians and Blacks is not equal. The level of violence and the murders of Black individuals in this country does not so greatly exceeds the level of violence that has been engineered against South Asians. And yet at the same time, we do have instances where we have an understanding of how anti-Blackness manifests in violence against ourselves. We have, the incident a few years ago in Alabama, where an elderly South Asian man who was visiting from India was seen as Black by white local police officers, was not able to make himself understood to them, was brutalized by them, and in turn ended up paralyzed. So I think we need to have more introspection and wake-up calls.
In New Jersey, efforts for coronavirus relief continue to help the most underserved communities and the ones in need. We have discussed the issue of food insecurity many times here on ITV Gold due to the economic and health ramifications of COVID-19 and its impact on the American society. So to bring in some relief and feed the community, recently the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce along with Sewa International held a drive-through food distribution at Oak Tree Road in Edison, New Jersey. The event saw key dry groceries of rice, lentils, and cooking oil to help families survive and provide food.
My name is Gary Pasricha. I'm from the Punjabi Chamber of Commerce, and we are proud to co-sponsor today's food drive here with Sewa International. Today we gave away rice, we gave away dal, and oil for our community. We're hoping that this goes a little bit towards helping our community towards fighting this hunger during this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you.
This food drive we did today with collaboration with Punjabi Chambers of Commerce. Today we are distributing 500 bags of food that includes 8 pounds of rice, 4 pounds of lentils, and 1 liter of cooking oil to almost 500 people here. This drive is still not over. We have already distributed over 400 now. We have another 100 to go. We are Sewa International. As you know, we are doing service in various areas with first responders. We are providing them PPE to hospitals, and we are also doing handmade masks. This is our second drive. Previous drive was in Mettachan, where we distributed about 25,000 PPE equipments to first responders, police departments, fire departments, and EMTs.
It's time for a short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. Come right back to us. Welcome back. This is Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community, and I am Aditi Lamba. We have now a get-to-know segment featuring cookbook author of Spice Baby, Dr. Kanchan Koya. A popular South Asian influencer and an author, Dr. Kanchan Koya, spoke to us about her cookbook and her platform, which brings light to the healing power of ancient spices and its health benefits. Inspired by South Asian culture and heritage, the cookbook features 100 simple and delicious recipes with 15 important spices. A molecular biologist, Dr. Kanchan Koya, brought in her vision of healthy eating for all through spices and their importance. A really positive and uplifting conversation with tips to practice healthy eating during quarantine. Here is Dr. Kanchan Koya on Spice Spice Baby.
What are some of the easiest spices to sort of introduce into our lives right now? Or what are some of the immunity boosting spices that you would recommend that perhaps our viewers try?
Yeah, so the ones that I've mentioned, I would just reiterate. Turmeric, I think, is just wonderful to cook with as often as possible. It's a very mildly flavored spice. It has bitter notes, but those notes mellow out when you put the turmeric in a fat source like ghee or oil. So don't just think of turmeric as like, oh, I'm making an Indian dish. Like, try to use it, you know, in scrambled eggs or in your smoothies, lots of different ways, right? That's a really important one and really powerful. I would say the other one, cumin, which is not as well thought of, is actually powerful at boosting the immune system as well. So I like sprinkling it on salads. I like, of course, using it as the base of a lot of Indian vegetarian dishes or whatnot, but putting it in your hummus again is great. Sumac, which I mentioned, not as familiar to the Indian kitchen. Really, really lovely every time you want to add any kind of lemon notes or limey notes. So that's a really beautiful one. Anything in the paprika, kind of smoked paprika, sweet paprika, spicy cayenne family is going to help with immunity, inflammation. And then maybe one more that I think people don't use as often, I would say, is cinnamon. So people think of cinnamon as like a dessert spice, but it's really wonderful in savory dishes. It's part of Indian garam masala, which is a savory spice. I always say if you're going to use cinnamon often, try to find what's called true or Ceylon or Sri Lankan cinnamon, because the regular cinnamon has high amounts or has measurable amounts of a liver toxin. So if you're using cinnamon on a regular basis, try to find the true cinnamon, which has no or very little coumarin, which is the liver toxin.
Wow, these are some very key tips from you, and thank you again for sharing those. You know, while I'm discussing with you all of the content of the book and certain ideas and tips, it makes me wonder, what was the process of writing this book? And what sort of put together the effort to publish it? I know you have a very interesting story about it, so I'd love for our viewers to actually, you know, learn about that too.
Yeah, so I self-published the cookbook, which really happened because I had the blog and I had a lot of interest, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time. And I didn't explore the traditional publishing route. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to crowdfund the book. I'm going to go to my blog audience and I'm going to ask them if they want the book. If they want the book, I'm going to ask them to pre-order it, and I'm going to use the funds to publish the book. And that's what I did. And it ended up being a very successful crowdfunding campaign. It was also the first self-published cookbook, I believe, to ever be featured on the Today Show on NBC, which was like a huge honor. So yeah, it just, you know, in hindsight, I'm just so grateful it all worked out. At the time, I was kind of like, let's just jump and hope the net appears. And, you know, it kind of did. So
you know, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a cookbook author, you're also doing a wide range of works. My question to you, you know, would that be, when you have so much going on, what are some of the greatest struggles that you've had to combat to find success in these? And, you know, what are some of the struggles that you deal with on a daily basis to make sure the content is fresh, is something that people are learning from, and that you're also giving out information that helps others?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it, because I think sometimes, you know, for us influencers, it seems like everything is so easy, effortless, and like there's never a bad day. So I'm like wired like every other human being. I have a lot of insecurities. I have imposter syndrome. You know, like I'm a PhD, like what do I know about cooking? Like I'm not a chef, I'm a self-trained chef. Like who's gonna want to cook my recipes? All that inner dialogue I have to deal with. I think whenever I face those inner demons, I just try to bring myself back to my why. So I have worked quite hard to articulate my why. Like, why am I doing this? Why did I write a book? Why do I have a blog? Why do I have an Instagram presence? Like, what's my content about? Why?
Right.
You know? And it really is like, sounds kind of maybe like, I don't know, idealistic or unrealistic or cheesy, but my why is really that I really do believe that it is possible for us to live in a world where humanity is disease free. So I like to imagine a disease free world through food and lifestyle as medicine, whether it's preventative medicine or therapeutic medicine. And so when I think about that, I just think about, oh, what can I create that's going to help people get out of that state of dis-ease? And disease doesn't have to be an overt medical condition, right? It can be, like, it can be a diabetes diagnosis or cancer diagnosis. And I'm really passionate about creating recipes or educating people about how to leverage the power of food, spices, lifestyle as medicine in those contexts. But you can feel dis-ease without having a disease, if you know what I mean. Like, you can feel like your vitality is missing. You can feel chronically tired. You can feel stressed. You can feel anxious, all of which we're all feeling right now. And all of which I feel, you know, very often. I'm a mom, like you said, I'm overextended. I'm an entrepreneur. I try to do too many things at once, and I feel all those things. So all the practices that I deploy for my own sanity and my own well-being are practices I share in my content. So that's really where the content comes from. And just going back to my why and realizing that social media is a highlight reel, and you can't, like, spending too much time on social media, I genuinely believe is bad for our mental well-being. So I like to use it as the powerful tool that it is, but also allow myself space away from it where I think, like, true creativity can blossom.
And that is all for tonight's show. Remember to send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on our Facebook handle @itvgold. You can also now subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch many of our popular shows for free. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.